Today on CityCast Philly, it's the Friday News Roundup. We're talking about what we now know about the mass shooting in Kingsessing, how the city is doing with gun violence and solving these cases, and why Bucks County prosecutors accuse a Philly towing company of leading a catalytic converter theft ring. It's Friday, July 7th. I'm Trinae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Joining me this week is Ellie Rushing, criminal justice reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Hey, Ellie.
Hey.
And Isaac Avalucia, reporter at Axios Philadelphia. Hey, Isaac.
Hey, good morning, Trinae.
Good morning. So yesterday on the show, the team and we went to a dive bar called McGlinchey's, which is also a smoking bar. And, there's not that many bars in Philly that, allow smoking indoors because of a 2008 city regulation. But I did my Google searches and I found out that actually today, July 7th, is National Dive Bar Day. Who knew? So I've got to ask y'all, what's your favorite dive bar in the city?
God, I'm a horrible person to ask this. I don't really hang out a lot of bars in Philly, in the burbs or otherwise. It's not a dive bar. I guess Morgan's Pier. I like the vibe there. It's outside. You can get a nice
We'll
drink.
count that for today.
I gotta go with the tried and true Pen and Pencil Club in Center City.
Now tell folks what Pen and Pencil Club is all about.
It's the oldest continuously operating press club in the United States, I believe, and it's located in Center City. It's a membership only club, and it's mostly for journalists or people who are kind of affiliated with the media. But anyone can join. It's $40 a year, and you can have exclusive events there, and we have all kinds of stuff going on. So it's a lot of fun, and you can smoke in there if you want, but only during certain hours.
Now, CityCast Philly, we had our launch party at Pen and Pencil, so that place is near and dear to us. I also like the Saint. Have you guys ever heard St. Lazarus? The technical name is St. Lazarus, but a lot of people call it the Saint. It's on Girard Avenue. They've got great DJs on Fridays and Saturdays, but it's a very small dance floor if you want to dance. It's very close, and it's a cash only bar, so I like that place.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
That's two more dive bars than I knew.
Good. We come with the recommendations. Okay. Shifting gears into top news this week, I want to put a disclaimer for folks listening. We're going to talk about gun violence, so please be advised if this topic is triggering for you. Ellie, I originally wanted to talk to you about your story on how the city was doing with gun violence in the first half of the year. But then in Southwest Philly this week, there was a deadly mass shooting. 5 people were killed and others were wounded, including children. All of this happened in the Kingsessing neighborhood. Can you kind of tell us where we are with this particular story?
Sure. So what we know so far is that just before 8:30 p.m. on Monday, July 3rd, police received calls of a person shooting in the street. And when they got there, it was a scene that police, have kind of rarely seen in a city that has seen its fair share of gun violence, especially over the past 5 years. They believe this man named Tim Brady Carricker, he's 40 years old, dressed in full body armor, wore a ski mask, and carried multiple guns, including an automatic rifle, and walked around Kingsessing, basically across 5 blocks, just shooting at anyone who was outside. I don't believe that any of the victims had any specific relation to one another. The ages of the victims range from a 2-year-old boy who was sitting in the backseat of his mother's car to a 59-year-old man. 5 people were killed, and their ages range from 15 to 59. And then 2 children were injured, the 2-year-old and a 13-year-old boy. And so, some of the victims, the first victim is a man named Joseph Wama Jr. He's 31. He heard Carricker screaming out in the street. He lives on 56th Street between Springfield and Chester Avenue. Character's out there screaming. A neighbor told me that he was yelling things like, it's time to go to war. He goes outside and obviously, didn't realize this person had a gun, and Character allegedly chased him and killed him. Character then basically moved down 56th Street, shooting at anyone who was outside, the mother driving the car, a 13-year-old boy who was walking, and then when his 15-year-old friend, DeJuan Brown, rushed out to see if anyone needed help because he heard gunfire, that's when he shot DeJuan and killed him. He moved down the block and then just looped back, and just in total 7 people were shot. He eventually basically just laid on the ground for police and let them take him into custody.
So Character has been charged, or he is in police custody, and we know that the motive seems to be random.
Basically, Kim Brady, he's estranged from his family. He's a biblical extremist, and he was progressively becoming more aggressive and in a downward spiral. He basically believed that he was out there helping law enforcement. He told the police, good job when they arrested him. He believed that he was trying to prevent community gun violence by killing people in the community. And he believed that a God, he specifically said Yahweh, which is a Hebrew word for God, was coming to help him.
Right.
And it's our understanding that he regularly wore body armor, regularly carried guns, and that, him being dressed in that outfit and going outside was not unusual, family members told law enforcement.
Wow. Now, Ellie, before this particular crime, you reported that shootings were going down in the first half of the year, right? Tell us a little bit about this particular story.
Yeah, halfway through 2023, so through June, the rate of gun violence in Philadelphia fell slightly, at least. A moderate decline compared to last year, but still, that decline is in comparison to 3 of the city's most violent years in recent memory. And the rate of shootings this year still remains double what it was in 2015. But so far this year, more than 900 people have been shot, and that's about a 20% decrease compared to the same time last year. But still, with this current pace, if the homicide rate remains the same through the end of this year will still be the 4th highest homicide in a single year since the 1990s. So it's still not a great year, but it does offer some semblance of hope.
And this is all according to police data that you found. And police and the Philadelphia police appeared to be making more arrests in these particular cases.
Yeah, so the clearance rate, which is, how many cases police solve in a year, is significantly higher than it was at the end of last year. We're at 60. They have a 61% clearance rate so far this year. And last year they ended the year at 47%. So that is a good sign. I haven't looked into why or, how that's happening yet. Sometimes it could be the difference just between, 10 cases, but it is significant.
For sure.
And on non-fatal shootings, the number is still at about 24%. So there's still some progress to be made there.
Okay, that does give some hope for families, for our neighbors. Ellie, this most recent shooting shocked many of us. Many of our neighbors are just exhausted from gun violence. And I know this question gets asked a lot, but what are authorities doing to get these numbers down? What can we do as a city to save lives of our loved ones? Or, what can we do as a city to reduce, or better yet, stop people from shooting or being shot?
It's the golden question that Philadelphia's been trying to answer for
Right.
decades. I think, in the last few years, the police department has been trying to take a more geographically targeted approach. At the beginning of this year, they added 100 more officers to the streets in 4 districts across North Philadelphia specifically that saw some of the highest rates of gun violence. And those districts have seen a decrease. Again, the whole city has seen a decrease. And the city has invested millions of dollars in community engagement grants that they're trying to really take kind of a new and unique approach by trying to invest in the communities that are on the ground and most connected to people who are committing acts of gun violence. The city has launched a handful of different initiatives, a group gun violence initiative where they're specifically looking at kind of like groups and gangs. And so that's all to say is that, it's hard to figure out exactly what's working. The city is kind of just taking an all hands on deck approach, throwing everything they can at this issue. And, at least in the last 2 years, things have gone down, but there's still a lot of work to do. And I think a lot of the solutions do have to start at the root, right? Schools, trauma, therapy. I mean, the things that Philadelphians have seen and witnessed in their lives, it's a lot of people have endured so much tragedy just in the last 3 years, and that really weighs on them and affects their mental health, and I believe does end up contributing to gun violence in the long term. So it has to be a multifaceted approach, and I guess we can only hope that what the city's doing now can at least help somewhere down the line.
Trina, if I could just jump in real quick, I thought one
Sure, Isaac.
interesting twist yesterday, and both of our outlets covered it, was Mayor Jim Kenney announced yesterday that the city is bringing litigation against two of the biggest ghost gun suppliers in Philadelphia, per the complaint, and that would be JSD Supply and then Polymer 80, a Nevada-based company that actually has been sued by a couple different states. A couple years ago, Los Angeles took the same tactic because a lot of these companies try to get around state and federal laws that require people purchasing firearms to undergo background checks. These companies take the position that, hey, we're just selling gun components, not actual firearms. We're not bound by those federal and state regulations. And so Los Angeles did what Philly's doing now, said, hey, no, 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 wait a minute. You do have to follow these regulations. We're going to sue to enforce that. And they actually got a $5 million settlement and an agreement from Polymer that said, we're going to not sell in the state unless we follow state and federal regulations and conduct background checks on people buying these component parts. So I think that's another tool in the kind of toolbox to try to weigh the hammer against gun violence in Philadelphia.
Isaac, thank you so much for bringing that story to us. And we'll have that link in our show notes. Shifting gears a bit, Isaac, another story that caught our eye is this really interesting case up in Bucks County where prosecutors accuse 11 people who were connected to a Philly tow trucking company of running a multi-million-dollar catalytic converter theft ring. Isaac, help us understand this story. First, what is a catalytic converter?
So a catalytic converter is a piece of equipment that's underneath the undercarriage of a vehicle that basically is used to kind of train out and eliminate emissions that are emitted from the engine. So these are very important components, and actually when you cut them off, it makes a horrible sounding noise when you have a car that no longer has a catalytic converter. So that's a telltale sign for anyone that has had their catalytic converter removed from their vehicle. It just sounds atrocious. And
Right. Okay.
it's a big problem in Philadelphia. It's a big problem across the state. And Bucks County District Attorney Matt Weintraub actually poured a lot of resources into busting up this multi-million dollar catalytic theft converter ring. And they kind of worked up the layers and worked up the levels and ended up ensnaring in this Philadelphia-based company, TDI Towing. Like you said, they charged 11 people, and authorities alleged that this was a multi-million dollar operation. They say TDI's exploits were $8.2 million per their calculations. And that's just in terms of the number of catalytic converters. They were buying about 175 a week. So they spent over a 3-year period starting in 2020 about $8.2 million. We
Right.
don't know exactly how much they were reselling these catalytic converters for, allegedly, I should say, because no one's been convicted. But the alleged kingpin of the operation was Michael Williams, the owner and operator of TDI Towing there in off the 2300 block of Wheatsheaf Lane in Philadelphia. Now, if you read the affidavit of probable cause, they really went in depth with this. They went all out with this. It was more than 24 law enforcement agencies that participated in this year-long investigation.
Right, because these catalytic converters were being taken from cars across counties, Bucks County, Montgomery County, and in Philadelphia, right?
Absolutely. It was a multi-tentacled, widespread investigation, and they actually did a couple of things. They set up cameras outside of TDI towing to catch some of these bad actors in the act. They had more than 5,000 hours of surveillance that they captured, and they actually showed one clip where some of these so-called cutters, the thieves that are actually taking either the cars or the catalytic converters and bringing them to TDI, they actually brought a stolen vehicle and were cutting off the catalytic converter outside of TDI. And it was so hot to the touch that they actually were dropping it in a puddle of water, and you could see the steam rising off the catalytic converter right outside of TDI towing. So Weintraub was saying literally these are hot catalytic converters, quite figuratively and literally.
Right. Now, what can people do if they think that their catalytic converter was stolen?
These can be kind of hard to trace,
Mm-hmm.
but Weintraub was saying, if contact the police, make a report. Don't think that it's a lost cause if your catalytic converter gets stolen, because they have a lot of investigative techniques and strategies that maybe they can line up some of these reports with either the theft ring, or they have a lot of investigative techniques that are available to them today that can help maybe uncover some information that leads to recovery or an arrest. And it's a headache for a lot of these people whose cars are impacted, who get their catalytic converters stolen. It can cost up to $2,000 or more to get it fixed.
Yeah. And Isaac, I also read that this issue is also being taken up. It made its way to the State House. Tell us what lawmakers are trying to propose.
There's a bill actually working its way through the House where they basically want to put more regulations on scrappers, more you have to identify and put stringent requirements on some of these tow places or other scrapyard fields and businesses that collect some of these metals. So it's easier to track some of these catalytic converters, and it's not just the wild, wild west like it was allegedly at TDI towing.
Wow. That was Isaac Avalucia, reporter at Axios Philadelphia, and Ellie Rushing, criminal justice reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thank you both so much for joining me this week on CityCast Philly.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
It's time for the tip of the week, where we share a life hack for living in Philly. The Department of Commerce announced the Merchants Fund, an emergency grant opportunity available for businesses in Northeast Philly that were impacted by the temporary closure of I-95. The application deadline is Wednesday, July 12th at 11:59 p.m. And the U.S. Small Business Administration will be opening a business recovery center at the Philadelphia Fire Department Engine 30H training facility today, July 7th at 11 a.m. to help answer any questions that you may have about low-interest emergency loans. We'll have a link in our show notes. If you have a tip of the week, we'd love to hear from you too. Call or text us at 215-259-8170. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. Our lead producer is Laura Benshoff. Our producers are Abby Fritz and Elizabeth Kama. Our Hey Philly newsletter editor is Brittany Valentine. And our host is me, Trenae Nuri. Music is by Philly's own Interminable, with additional music from All the Kimonos and James Weldon. If you enjoy this week of episodes, tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter, Hey Philly. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Have a great weekend and be safe, y'all. Bye.
I was going to say, Ellie, if you had the answer to that, you should run for office.